the word Gnostic simply means somebody who knows.
To
It
know.
comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means know, to know, to know. And so Gnostics there are various groups of Gnostics. The differences among them, just like the Greek Orthodox versus the Moormans, I mean, they're very different. But they did agree that knowledge was the way of salvation, and that it's not Christ's death that brings about salvation. It's the secret knowledge that he revealed. And he revealed how people can understand the world and reality and who they really are, so that they can escape the material trappings of this world to return to the spiritual home they came from.
Dr.
I'm
Bart
pardon my
Ehrman.
voice, Neil, because I've had a cold, and so we'll pray for the best.
Yes, we will. I just got off a cold myself, so
Okay. All
I
right.
feel for you. And I just purchased a webinar that is next week, hosted by yours truly. So tell anybody in my audience who hasn't heard about it yet how they can get there.
Well, so if they just go to bartehrman.com/Christmas, or I suppose you'll probably be posting a link. Maybe this is going to be a lot of fun. So it's going to be on Sunday, December 5th. It's going to be an all-day webinar. I'm giving 4 lectures. My voice will be better by then. I'm going to give 4 lectures back to back, lunch break back to back, and people will be able to ask questions. I'll answer the question, as many questions as I get, and the entire webinar is going to be on the topic: did the Christmas story really happen? And so, what do you know? What do we know about the birth of Jesus, if anything? We got legends, you got history. Is what can you tell really happened? You got these stories in the New Testament, you got stories outside the New Testament. Are any of them plausible? How do we know? The whole shebang. And so it'll be a full day thing. And so people are welcome to come. I hope they can come, because it's a nice time of the year to talk about this kind of thing.
And it is the season, so perfect timing. And so this book right here, it's one of my favorites, and it's one that you wrote. How long? Like
Long time ago.
Okay, so
My youth.
so I want to ask you about the. First of all, let's start with this. Let's do a true or false. You can just tell me true or false, and then you can elaborate.
Okay.
So is this true or false that Christians now, with all these sects and denominations, you got Mormons, you got Catholics, you got evangelicals, they disagree on so much stuff that they probably disagree more than the Christians in the original 2nd century would. The Christians in the 2nd and 1st century must have agreed on everything, because they're right off the time Jesus was alive, right? True or false?
False. So it's what I used to think. But all you have to do is read the early sources of Christianity, and you see, oh my goodness, it's crazily diverse. In the 2nd century, you've got church fathers who are attacking Christian groups that claim to be Christian, claim to be followers of Jesus, claim they have support in biblical writings for their views that there are 2 different gods. It's not just like the gods different in the Old Testament, New Testament. There are literally 2 different gods. Some say there are 12 gods. There are Christians who say they're followers of Jesus who say there are 36 gods. We know one group that says there are 365 gods. They're
Wow.
Christian. And so the views are just so far all over the map. You would think, well, that's got to be like, after a few hundred years, things split off. No, right off the bat, in the 2nd century, we would definitely have that. And one of the interesting questions of scholarship is, how early does the diversity go? What's really interesting that most people haven't noticed is that when Paul writes his letters in the New Testament, virtually every letter, he's attacking other Christians who have false views that completely disagree with his.
Right.
Yeah, we don't have their writings. That would be
Yeah. So, okay, so let's talk about these groups now. You got the Marcionites, right, on one side, and they don't like the Old Testament God. That's, they think that's a demiurge. I don't know if you call them Gnostics or not. And then on the other side, you got the Ebionites, who are followers of the Torah. Pretty much the exact opposite. They love the Old Testament. They follow the laws. They do kosher. They do all that stuff. And then you got what I guess you would call the Proto-Orthodox ones, who are kind of in a different camp.
Yeah.
Can you kind of elaborate on what the differences are with those?
Yeah. So no, you got it right. So the Marcionites are followers of a man named Marcion, who was a teacher theologian, who said, look, the God of the Old Testament really is not the God of the New Testament. I mean, just look at it. In the Old Testament, God tells his people to go into the city of Jericho and destroy it. They march around the city once a day for 6 days, and the seventh day walk around 7 times, blow the trumpets, the walls fall down, and then God tells them, go in there and slaughter every man, woman, and child and animal in the city. Is that the same God who says, love your neighbor?
Doesn't
Love
sound
your
like it.
enemy? Pray for those who persecute you? No, that's a different God. And
Right.
so Marcion really thought there were two gods. The God of the Old Testament created this world, which is why it's such a mess. And the God of Jesus came to save people from that God. So the God of Jesus is not the creator, not the God of the Old Testament. It's a different God. So he thought that. Then you've got people on the other side of the fence who are Jews. They're raised Jewish or they became Jewish who say, no, the God of the Old Testament is the Christian God. And in fact, Jesus is the son of that God. And Jesus did not cancel the Old Testament. When God said don't eat pork, he means you're not supposed to eat pork. He didn't change his mind. And so if you're going to be a follower of the Jewish Messiah, from the Jewish God to the Jewish people to fulfill the Jewish law, you got to be Jewish. And so one is like completely opposed to Judaism. The other is embracing Judaism. They're both claiming to be followers of Jesus. And that doesn't bring into account all of the Gnostic groups that are really bizarre by modern thinking,
Right.
that are really, impossible to explain in 1 minute.
Right.
But so yeah, you get all of these diverse groups going on.
And so with Marcion, you got an interesting story with him. He goes to Rome and he's trying to sell his version of Christianity there, and it sort of fails. What happens with that?
So Marcion was the traditional dating is that Marcion was in the middle of the 2nd century, and that he's from the north central Turkey, on the shore of the Black Sea, and he ended up developing his own theological system that I was just explaining a little bit of.
Right.
And he decided to go to Rome in the year 139, and he spent about 5 years in Rome, developing his system and writing books. And then he presented his views to the Roman hierarchy of the church, the leaders of the Roman church, hoping that they would accept his perspective as being the authoritative view. But instead, they rejected it and kicked him out of the church.
Right.
And so then he went around Asia Minor and he started starting his own churches, and he was very, very successful. There were areas in what's now Turkey that were predominantly Marcionite. This was the kind of Christianity they had. And I would say that a lot of Christians today are still Marcionite. A lot of Christians say, "Yeah, we don't follow the Old Testament, or we don't keep the Old Testament God. He's the God of wrath. We follow the God of love." Well, okay, but I mean that's Marcionite.
That's a good point. And it's, they don't even realize they're doing that. They just kind of are.
No,
You see, even evangelicals will talk about how the law kept people in bondage, and the New
Yeah.
Testament now we're free from that law. We're circumcised in the heart.
Yeah.
We don't need the Torah.
Yeah.
And that's sort of Marcionite in a little bit of way,
Yeah.
right?
Well, the other way Christians are Marcionite today is that Marcion said that since the Creator who made this world, the material world, was not the true God, not the God of Jesus, Jesus could not belong to the Creator God, which means Jesus couldn't have a material body. Jesus was God. He wasn't. He seemed like a human, but it was just an appearance. And today, if I ask my students, they'd say, "Yeah, well, Jesus was God." Well, was he really a human? Well, he's kind of a human, but they don't really think he was a human being. And so that's Marcionite.
Yeah, you get one of these like things that defy mathematics when you say he's 100% God and 100% man. It's like, how can you be 100% of any two things?
Yeah, right. And how can you have a Trinity where the three are all equally God? They're different persons. All three of them, they're equally God, and there's only one God. Well,
Right.
this is how Christian theology developed, and it's interesting in its way because it's very paradoxical, and to that extent, it's actually quite sophisticated. But it doesn't make mathematical sense.
Yeah, and so it's funny because you hear about different denominations today, and you look at Mormons compared to Catholics, or evangelicals compared to Orthodox Greek, whatever,
Yeah,
and you think they're so far apart.
yeah,
But if you compare them to the Marcionites and the Ebionites, they're actually closer together because they
yeah,
at least agree on who Jesus was, which is
yeah.
a big deal.
They agree on who Jesus. There are all sorts of things they have in common that are different from most of these ancient groups. I mean, Greek Orthodox and Mormons, when they talk about the New Testament, they've got the same 27 books in their New Testaments. I mean, and Marcion didn't. Marcion had a canon of only 11 books. He didn't have any Old Testament. He had some Gospels, kind of like that was like our Luke, and he had 10 of Paul's letters. That was it. So, very, very different.
Okay, so let's get into the Gnostics a little bit, because I am the Gnostic informant, so we should talk about
Yeah,
that.
you can talk about
Is
that.
that really were people calling themselves Gnostics, or is this a later term that we use to define groups? Was that really a thing or no?
The term Gnostic was used. We don't know that Gnostic groups used it of themselves. Their opponents used it of Gnostics. And
Okay.
there actually were Proto-Orthodox Christians like Clement of Alexandria who considered himself a Gnostic, because the word Gnostic simply means somebody who knows.
To
It comes
know.
from the Greek word gnosis, which means know, to know, to know. And so there are various groups of Gnostics. The differences among them, just like the Greek Orthodox versus the Mormons, I mean, they're very different. But they did agree that knowledge was the way of salvation, and that it's not Christ's death that brings about salvation. It's the secret knowledge that he revealed. And he revealed how people can understand the world and reality and who they really are, so that they can escape the material trappings of this world to return to the spiritual home they came from.
Yeah, and you can see in the writings of Paul why this is considered heretical, because Paul talks about knowledge being insufficient, and that he even gets into works being insufficient. It's all about faith. And then you go late, couple books later, you get to James, and James is like, well, it's about works.
Yeah, yeah.
He calls him like a you idiot or something. He says something like that, and then you could kind of tell. I think, and correct me for what you think if you disagree or not. I think he's talking to Paul. It looks like he's talking to Paul.
I have a so I thought that for a long time. I actually have a different view of that now, which is a close view to that. I think that actually, I don't think James and Paul are disagreeing. I think what's going on is that James is disagreeing with later Christians who took Paul's teachings to an extreme.
Okay.
What Paul taught was that a person cannot be made right with God by doing the works of the law. By that, he meant you can't become right with God by becoming Jewish. Becoming Jewish ain't going to get you there. So the works of the law for Paul means like things like getting circumcised and keeping kosher and observing the Sabbath. Doing that stuff's not going to put you in the right relation. You've got to have faith with Christ. So he had this thing about works of the law. But later, Pauline Christians said, you can't be right with God by doing works. And they appear to me like doing good things. And you find that already in the New Testament. The book of Ephesians claims to be written by Paul. It almost certainly was not written by Paul. The guy who wrote Ephesians thought that you can't be saved by doing good things. James is attacking that.
Right, that makes sense. That's a good way to
You know
look
what
at
I
it.
mean? So it's a Pauline form of Christianity, but I don't think it's exactly how Paul would have put it.
Yeah, and I mean, so it seems to me that Christianity is sort of like you sort of get handed down these concepts from like the Gnosis. Pythagoras wrote about Gnosis. I think Plato did too. Concept like the logos that Philo was talking about,
Yeah.
and it seems like the back and forth in the epistles that people call contradictions. I used to think that it was one of my like, oh, look, the Bible contradicts itself. But now I'm sort of seeing it's more like a Platonic, not a dialogue, but like here's different situations and here's
Uh-huh.
how you handle these situations.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
it's that's how it's put together on
Yeah.
purpose.
Well, I think it's a helpful way to look at it. I mean, I do think, there are obvious contradictions, I think, in my opinion, but a lot of it is kind of dialogical. Um, but the dialogical aspect of it shows that people have different perspectives, and they're trying to feed off of different perspectives and trying to provide more nuance, and and so it isn't kind of a black and white thing that, this author says this and then this author completely contradicts. Sometimes it happens, especially in narratives, especially like in the Gospels, where you've got two accounts of Jesus doing something. You just can't reconcile them no matter how much you try. Um, but a lot of times it's what you're saying. They're playing off of each other.
Yeah. So I got 1 minute left. So I'm going to say, in conclusion, I think it's safe to say that I think Christians today should sort of take for granted the fact that to be a Christian, you have to believe X, Y, and Z about Jesus. You have to believe that he died, that he resurrected, that he's God, whatever. But back in the earlier, before the church became the state religion, you didn't have to. There wasn't no. You didn't have to believe anything. You just belonged to a certain group, and that's the way it was.
Yeah, the way I guess I would put that is before you start getting these creeds develop in the 4th century, you have different groups that had different beliefs, and there was no standard. Um, but of course, in the 4th century, they started developing creeds like the Nicene Creed, where we believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. And, like you got to say this. And
Right.
so it becomes more standardized. Even when you make it standardized, though, of course, people interpret it in different ways. And that's why you get the Mormons and the Greek Orthodox. They're still very different from each other.
Yeah.
But it is more unified now, I think, than it was then.
Yeah, I would agree. And thanks for coming on. And everybody,
Right.
the link's in the description for the webinar, and go check that out. And you have just attained true gnosis.